Senator Flake, great to see you. You know, I remember hearing about you when you came to the House, and people said, this guy is going places, this guy is the face of the new conservative movement. And now you're leaving,
right.
And not entirely voluntarily. Right. Do you ever wake up in the morning and say, what happened?
Yeah, I do.
You had this, you posted this video in 2016 of elephants charging your Jeep, and it strikes me that that's sort of a metaphor here. Like the Republican Party is not the Republican Party that you recognize.
No, it's not. I have a carved rhinoceros in my office, rhino, Republican in name only. I guess I've just embraced it.
You wrote this book, in fact, about that called
Right.
Conscience of a Conservative. I read somewhere that you didn't tell your staff that you
Right.
were working on this, but it is a blistering indictment of President Trump and Trumpism and the direction of the party.
Right. It's not just an indictment of Trump and Trumpism, but we were headed this direction, long ago. We kind of stopped being the party of limited government, economic freedom, individual responsibility, and kind of drifted off to fight the culture wars. That's when you always know you're in a bad place, when you stop talking as a Republican about limited government or limiting spending, and you start talking about flag burning or other cultural issues or immigration to try to make up for not being conservative fiscally. You have to emphasize other issues. And when we started doing that, 2006, with Terry Schiavo issues and whatnot, I knew we were in trouble, and we lost the majority in the House and the Senate at that time.
But you look at the tax cuts, very, very strong wave of deregulation.
Right.
But you don't believe the president is a conservative.
Well, no, I don't. And being a conservative,
you voted with him a bunch. You're probably in the top 5 of people who voted with the president
well, in terms
on policy.
of, when you look on the policies, most of what the Senate does in the first year of a president's time is vote on his nominees, filling out his cabinet, and then court picks as well. And I'm a conservative, and so I do vote to put the judiciary in a more conservative direction, certainly deregulation. But being a conservative is not just being conservative on policy, it's being conservative in comportment and demeanor and manners. And we have anything but that in the White House right now.
And you wrote about this in your book. I was in a focus group in Peoria the other day with a group of people who had voted for Trump. They don't like his tweeting,
right?
But basically they say he's fulfilling his promises, and
right.
On this very issue that troubles you, his sort of lack of decorum, they say, you know what, he says the stuff other people won't say, and sometimes it's a little rough, right. But he, at least he's authentic, we know that he says what he thinks, and it's really an indictment of politicians.
Yeah, it is, but words matter. Words matter. When the president talks about the press as the enemy of the people, for example, and then talks about fake news, calling real news fake and fake news real, that has ramifications, particularly internationally, when authoritarians everywhere now borrow that language to justify cracking down on dissent and legitimate opposition as fake news. When the president talks about Mexicans in a demeaning way, or talks about Mexico paying for the wall, that has ramifications, long-term ramifications. And so that's why, when people say these tweets or this language, it doesn't matter, it's just Trump being Trump, it does matter. I just returned from a trip overseas for a week in the Middle East, talking to our diplomats, talking to heads of state and others, and these things matter. These things matter, and it's not the way a conservative should act.
You use the word authoritarians for regimes overseas, but you also use the authoritarianism as a concern about what's happening here. In fact, you gave a speech on this freedom of the press.
It is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin to describe his enemies.
You mentioned a phrase that the president uses about
Right.
the media called enemies of the people, and you note that it was a phrase that Stalin used. Do you think the president has authoritarian instincts, authoritarian impulses?
Well, he certainly has a fondness for authoritarians around the world that I just don't understand. I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding, and is not very healthy in terms of our position in the world. But I wasn't comparing the president to Stalin. Nobody compares to Stalin.
Right.
But what I couldn't understand, and still can't understand, is why the president would borrow language so identified with Stalin, calling the press the enemy of the people.
I think it's
A
fair to say
president
he
should know
probably
better.
hadn't read that history.
Then his staff should tell him.